North America started developing, and so they created a middle class that was relatively well off. We now kind of look back, because that's quite topical. If you haven't read the book, I think it's a good read. It's quite an easy book, this by Piketty. Very long, what it says, and all of his research is published elsewhere. It's just written in the form of a book. To unexpectedly become a bestseller. The book had been out a couple of years in French, and nobody taken any notice of it. But then suddenly, everybody started talking about it. And a lot of friends were not, my friends were not economists. Said, "Oh, shall I read that book?" Yeah, read that book. It's well written and so on. But you can find everything that is economic interest in other papers. This Journal of Economic Literature, Atkinson, Piketty, Stas, Taxation of Income, and various other papers here. The slides themselves are from Piketty, kind of shamelessly stolen them from his website. So what's his story? What's essentially the story of the book? The description side of the book. The description side of the book is, well, the book kind of recounts how he and Tony Atkinson started this project of looking at the income of the very rich. Okay? And so they started looking at tax data for France. And tax data for France, because the French revolutionaries had very specific idea and they were very well organized and so on. So they started collecting data on estate and property and so on, and then taxes was collected, and civil service in France is very efficient, so they there is quite good data going back for 2 centuries in France. And then they start looking at other countries. So they've, after a kind of painstaking work, they've reconstructed annual series of the top 10% of income tax returns, and then the top 1%, and also the top 0.1%. All these series are in their book. Okay? So a simple story could be summarized by these two by these two bullets. Okay? And they call it the fall of rentier and the rise of the working rich. Okay? So a lot of income in the past, at least until, say, 1914, a lot of income is income from property. Okay? People were very rich, had owned vast tracts of land, and some of this land had been transformed into factories that again were highly productive and so on. Where land was abundant, like the United States, the process was even easier. So as soon as you get, 2 million square kilometers of land, and then it so happens that you get oil in this land, it becomes very rich very rapidly, very quickly. So that's a kind of story that people in the 19th century became rich. Up until the 19th century, became well rich because they owned properties. Okay? Land, essentially land. We'll see more details of how property was. However, income from capital just collapsed. Okay? Collapsed for a variety of reasons. First of all, the war simply destroyed capital. Okay, so if there is a lot of capital, then you lose it. A lot of people died in the war, especially a lot of men, and especially then, men were the main workforce. So a resource becomes very scarce, and as a consequence, its price goes up. Okay? So a simple story of the relative price of capital and labor becoming changing the relative scarcity. Plus, partly accompanied by that, labor becomes more politically organized. You get trade unions, you get democracy, you get franchise, and so the relative political power of volunteer capital owners and labor owners changes, and that gives rise to movement towards progressive taxation, income taxation, and so on. Okay. Now, what Piketty and Atkinson kind of claim is that the two world war were instrumental in causing this shock, a very profound and very important shock to the balance of the economic system, or the world economic system. And the reason why they feel they had to stress this point is because there is a theory, the so-called Kuznets theory of economic development, which Kuznets was one of the earliest Nobel laureates in economics. And he kind of suggested that there is a natural tendency towards equality. Yeah, you have some questions?
The business good was the one who went up to a certain point and then went down.
Yeah. So in the original society there is little inequality because everybody is poor. Then as economic development starts, then some people get rich and that creates inequality, and then eventually the middle class and the poor rise, and that reduces inequality. So they claim that this reduction in inequality, which happened, say, from 1914 to the end of 1950, was caused by the wars that had profound change in both the distribution of capital, ownership, and the relative political power of groups of families. And then they say, since the 70s, labor income became, started earning more, and in particular top labor income started becoming very highly paid. Okay, so the chief executive of big companies did not necessarily own these companies, started making a lot of money through salaries and options and etc. Okay, so this is what they call is a kind of naive interpretation of the development of the last couple of centuries. So they say, prior to 1914, the very rich was the Great Gatsby, that did nothing, did no work, just enjoy his wealth. And now the archetypal rich person is Bill Gates, George Soros, that worked very hard and started from very little. So they didn't, Bill Gates, when he was 17, 18, was a very bright student, but with no particular family income, and now is the wealthiest man in the world after 30 years or so. Okay, so that's the difference. Pre-war capital, since in the 21st century, the rich are people who work they're lucky, of course, but they've earned the money through their labor. And so we can start looking at figures, because it's important to understand how these trends pan out. Okay, so this is the as the sources Piketty and says, an old series which he updated for the lecture he gave recently. So this is the income share of the top decile of the income distribution. So take the 10% richest people in the country, in this particular case the United States, and look at what share they have of the total national income. Okay? And so we can see that just after the war, we went up to about 50%. So the top 10% of people earned 50% of income, and then it just collapses with the war. It stays low for a long time until the 80s, and then it starts climbing again quite rapidly until in 2007, just at the beginning of the financial crisis, it so happens to be just higher than it has ever been in the 20th century. Okay? So that's a kind of good description. These are big differences. Okay? So we hover around at 35%, a third, still quite a lot of inequality here, but now the level is much higher. And that's the United States, and here we have other countries, European countries plus Japan. Okay? Here we have the top 1% share. Okay, so this is the famous, the 1%, the 1% richest people in the country, richest in the sense of income. And so if we look at this country, the trend is quite similar. So pre-war, we got very high levels, so which is across Sweden, the most unequal country, where the top 1% had almost 30%, earned almost 30% of total income. And then Sweden has come down. Is that Sweden? No. Then Sweden has come down, is now kind of a rather more equal. Still 5%. So 5 times richer than the average, and so on. But the share is now hovering around between 5 and 10%. Okay, with similarity across these very different countries. So that's kind of a trend that we kind of would like to explain. Is it different in the rest of the world? In developing countries, okay, again, painful reconstruction of the data by Piketty, or probably his research assistants. Again, 1%. So Argentina, it was a very good place to be rich around the war. So the top 1% had 25% of the income. Now it's gone down. But now you see, you can argue, and these are these kind of regressional lines here, you can argue that the trend has now been reversed and incomes have started growing, becoming, so the very rich now getting richer. Still much higher inequality. Remember here we had between 5 and 10% in these countries, and so quite a lot of countries in the developing world have more inequality. Okay, so one exception here, this is communist China, that remains